Hey guys, here in this video I will show you all extreme character in this game that already had an adjustment, or we can call it buff. So we're gonna start here with our Akainu Shanks, just at 2023 February. Let's see. Shanks normal's attack before buff, you guys can see the speed is kinda slow. And after buff, you guys can see the speed is much more faster now. So that's for Shanks normals, it become faster than before buff. And then skill 1 before buff, you guys can see here. Right, skill 1 still. Right, and now skill 1 after buff, you guys can see. Okay, it's not getting faster, but I think it's getting wider, and yep, of course the range is wider than before. See that? Still skill 1, right, that's cool, wider. And now skill 2, you guys see? Skill 2 before buff of Shanks, pretty slow there, and you can see now after buff. See that difference is really fast now, and it's really amazing. Next one is Kuroige. Skill 1 before buff. Let's see. This is skill 1 before buff still. And after buff, it's adjust to be easier to land. Okay. So let's see. Well, I don't really know, but it might be a wider range. What do you think? Now skill 2 before buff for Kuroige. Right, you guys can see, and this is really noticeable after the buff. Please wait. We see the skill 2 before buff first. Later the range of the black area is wider. Okay, you guys see this before buff. And now after buff, skill 2. Let's see. See that, bro? It's really wide now, man. See that? Oh my god, it's really amazing for Kuroige. Skill 2 after buff, and then normals after buff. And yeah, I don't have really much clip of Kuroige normals before buff, and this is Kuroige normals after buff. Well, I don't really think it's had a change, but might be the range is wider but not the speed. And then after buff, Kuroige get a recovery when he's downed. Hunger Pangs Bigamum adjust at March 2024. This is her normals before buff. We see her normals before buff first. And after buff, it said that the normals have increased range and easier to land. Well, I suppose it's not getting faster, but it's getting wider for the normals of Bigamum. And then skill 1 before buff. Skill 1 before buff for Bigamum only did damage and inflict a shock for ourselves, but doesn't nullify status effect. As you guys see here, we get confused. But after buff, her skill 1, aside from attack and give us electricity effect, it also make us nullify status effect, as you guys can see here. See that? We didn't get any tremor. This is really broken for Bigamum. And then skill 2 before buff, you guys can see. Right. For skill 2 after buff, which really noticeable is about the ignore obstacle. You guys can see this skill 2 after buff, guys. So yep, skill 1 before buff cannot ignore obstacle, but I don't have the clip. And then before buff, Hunger Pangs Bigamum cannot ignore enemy, as you guys see in this video. But after buff, you see here, we can ignore the enemy, guys. We can cap the flag even the enemies inside the treasure area. So Hunger Pangs Bigamum is really broken after buff, guys. You guys can see it here, man. Right, amazing. Next, Kaizoku Gold Roger adjust at August 2024, guys. And let's see his normal attack before buff first. Alright. And then we gotta see his normal attack after buff. Right, it's not getting faster for his normal attack, but I think it's getting wider, increased attack range for normal attack of Roger. And then skill 1 Kamusari before buff, you guys can see. Alright, that's cool. Now after buff skill 1, you guys can see, right, I think it's slightly a bit faster, and yeah, I think the range is wider also, and now it ignores obstacle. Skill 2 now before buff. Alright, you see that for skill 2 doesn't ignore obstacle after buff, unlike Kamusari. Yep, still skill 2 before buff. And now we're gonna see skill 2 after buff. Well, alright, it doesn't have increased speed, so I guess it's about range. It's getting wider for Roger's skill 2 after buff. So that's for Roger. And then we go on. Yamato, just at November 2024. This is her normals before buff. You guys can see here Yamato normals before buff. Now normals after buff. Alright, it doesn't get faster too, but the range is now wider. I can see, you guys can see it also, especially the third hit is more wider. I can see there. Nice one, man. Skill 1 before buff, you guys can see it, right? Holding skill. And now skill 1 after buff. Right, I suppose it's also the wider and the strange power. It's wider range and amazing. Skill 2, this is counter skill, okay, before buff. And now skill 2 after buff, let's see. Yo, you guys can see the ground shattering, like it's more stronger, more longer, more wider. Okay, now one hate speed left trait. So now Yamato, as long as she's inside of flag, she won't die. Unlike before when she captured flag, but this time whatever she do, as long as she stay in the flag, she's immortal. Well, unless there is a trait of character that nullify that. Okay, that's for Yamato. Dragon Kaido this time. Same with Yamato, just at November 2024. This is Kaido normals before buff. You guys can see it right here. Now normals after buff. Yo, this is it. The speed is very fast now. The buff is like Shanks, which is having speed up for normals attack. Amazing for Kaido here, guys. That's his normals. And the skill 1 before buff, you can see this is the holding skill. Alright, one more time we see skill 1 before buff. Now skill 1 after buff. Let's see. Yo, wait, there is a win. Oh man, the speed, and it seems like the power is also getting faster. Oh my god, this is the best buff I ever see, guys. The animation also got some kind of like upgrade. We got a win, and also it's getting faster and seems like, yo, oh my god, this really different, man. And now after buff, Kaido can ignore enemy and fill up the treasure. Skill 2 before buff, you guys can see this. Skill 2 before buff, alright. And then skill 2 after buff. Oh my god, bro. Fast. It's really made the speed up. It's really fast, guys. Oh my god, that's for Kaido buff, everyone. I really like Kaido buff here. What's your opinion? And lastly, we're gonna see Akainu before and after buff, guys. We're gonna show you first Akainu normals before buff here. And now Akainu normals after buff. We can see it's not getting faster, they already say that, but it become wider, it become longer. That's Akainu normals after buff. And then we're gonna see now Akainu skill 1 before buff. Let's see here first. And then his skill 1 after buff is not getting faster, but the range is getting increased for Akainu skill 1, and also it got increased the mates again captain character. So that's Akainu skill 1 after buff. Now Akainu skill 2 before buff. Let's see here. And Akainu skill 2 after buff, it got increased attack range also, but not getting faster. You guys can see here. What's your opinion? I don't really see, I mean, yeah, didn't really see increased range, but they say it's increased range but not increased speed for Akainu skill 2 after buff. What's your opinion about that, guys? And next, after skill 2, we gotta see Akainu normals at max state. You guys can see this is before buff, and they said after buff the max state normals attack got increased speed. You gotta see that. This is before buff still. And now after buff. Yeah, it might be slightly faster, but not very fast, I can say. I mean, it's not very noticeable, but yeah, they said it's becoming faster a bit. That's Akainu normals at max state after buff. And lastly, perfect dots before buff. When before buff, if we got perfect dots, yep, we didn't got a recovery. And after buff, if we got a perfect dots, there is a recovery for Akainu. So that's all, everyone. What's your opinion about every character buff in this month? Thank you for watching.